All right, in three, two, one. Well. Welcome to another episode of Fearlessly Parenting. Today, I have an awesome guest, Gail Swift. She's here with us today, and I'm not going to occupy any more of your listening time. I'm going to turn directly to her, and I have a question for her. She's a parenting coach. She's out in California, and in some of the things I read about her, she says that she's able to help parents understand their children. So I got, what do you mean by that? Don't parents already understand their children? I think I already know the answer to that, but I want to say.
I think like me, I thought I did. I mean, you want to, everyone wants to, but they come at it with their own lens, as you're very aware. And so that's an automatic filter for not understanding your kids, because you understanding them completely would mean no filter. And so when I say understanding your kids, I mean how they take action when free to be themselves, not with your help. And understanding them in that capacity, makes all the difference in the world.
I'm a behavioral consultant, and I do DISC, and I've done assessment of teenagers and children. And what parents have to realize is that your child's not weird or strange. They're just not you.
Right.
I have a dominant personality, but I have a bubbly, happy-go-lucky daughter who's an I on the DISC scale. And she's a people person. Everything is about her. She loves being around people. But that's who she is. If I'm going to talk to her, if I'm going to connect effectively with her, I got to talk to my daughter in her language. So let me ask you, how do you go about solving this connection problem between parent and child, when the parent's trying to fit them in their lens rather than viewing the child as they are?
I think it's important to identify how your child works and how you work, so then you will very clearly see the differences. For example, on one small example is my husband has a great need for details when he solves a problem. He does a lot of fact checking, and he cites sources, and he figures out what the expert is and who the expert is in the industry of the problem that he wants to solve. My youngest son has very little need for detail to make his best decision. So, as you can see, I've laid the groundwork for a potential harmonious conclusion or a disastrous conclusion, depending on how you look at it, depending on how the parent comes at the child. So if my husband comes at my son with, did you do your homework? Did you do the background? Did you do this? Did you check this? Did you check that? Mm-hmm. Then the child is left with a decision. I don't want to make my dad mad. I want to please my father, but yet I don't need that much detail. So right off the bat, when you ask those kinds of questions, he's in a quandary. Mm-hmm. And if he's true to himself, the answer would be, no, I did not, Dad, because I don't need as much detail, or I don't need that information to make a decision for myself. Right? So a question, you understand, you follow me, right?
Oh, yeah. I most definitely do, because, a lot of parents, we're human, and we think a certain way. So we think our kids ought to act a certain way. Or why can't you be more like Johnny? Or why can't you be more like Mary? Well, the reason they can't be more like Mary is because they're not married. God has given all of us wonderful gifts. We're
Amen.
all fearfully and wonderfully made,
mm-hmm.
but we're not all the same. And I love your thoughts that, you got to sort of fix the parent in this. We were kind of talking about this earlier before we kicked off the interview. Sometimes you got to fix the parent. And I love the way you said that a parent will come at a child this way, they'll come at a child this way. And that's telling me that, hey, you as mom and dad, you have control as how you come at your child. Uh, what are some tips that you can give parents so that they not only communicate, but they connect when they communicate?
I have a phrase that I like to use, and it's called questions over suggestions at every age and every stage. So instead of coming at with a suggestion, and you know that person is completely capable, completely wired by God to solve problems, and you know how they're wired, you're holding the blueprint. Come at it with a question, not with an intention behind it or a judgment behind it, but a curiosity. Asking parents to be curious is a hard thing with a child. It's a hard thing, but instead of suggesting, so ask, what kind of information or how much information do you need to make that decision to move forward? What are you looking for? Like literally out of curiosity, I will ask my son, what are you looking for to move forward? And he'll say, I've got what I need, or I'm looking at this and then I'm done. And I'm like, fantastic. So you're questioning about the journey and his process, not if he's right or wrong, because I already know he's capable. I already know it.
Hear on that, parents, because what she's doing here, she's asking her kids calibrated questions that begin with what and how, that, communicates to your child that you're curious about them and that your focus is on them. And when you come at a child with how and what, it's hard for them to take it and feel that it's judgmental. That is so good, Gail. Love it. Let me ask you this: what other problems beyond communication, though that is key and an underlying issue for many of the things that might go wrong in a house, what other problems might parents encounter in the household that you help them out with?
I work with the third part of the mind. So I work with the cognitive part of the mind, how people solve problems. But there are three parts of the mind, Stan. Okay. And I believe you work with an affective part. And so here's what happens when you ignore. Here's what happens when you overrule. Long enough times when you overrule how someone works or discount it, discredit it, you will see guaranteed behavioral problems. And that may be where you come in. Because over time, if that person, if that child has been sidestepped, overlooked, not validated, not old enough, can't do it, there will be some backlash. And so typically that is when you or I are called in, is when the negative starts to appear. The negative. Yeah.
Yeah, so, not only bad behavior, but sometimes, kids have issues and parents have issues too, because they have limited beliefs. And what I mean by limited beliefs is like, well, if it wasn't like this, I could do better. Or if I only had this, I could do better. Or because my parents don't think I can't. Because my parents think that I'm a bad kid. Maybe sometimes, they do turn out to be a bad kid. They act that out. Or they can't connect with their parents, and they go outside the home and get with their friends and everything who tell them who they are. And then they're limited in their belief system by their friends. Is that some of the things that you encounter as a parenting coach?
I'm going to ask you a question with that question.
Go right ahead.
If you're a parent and you start questioning to grow your child and have I wanted my kids, I want them to be contributors. Mm-hmm. You cannot have a passive contributor. It's an oxymoron. They're only active contributors. And so with questions, if you form and agree to, before they even come out of the womb, Stan, you agree that you will have an active contributor to the world. There's only one thing that happens when you continue to ask questions, and that is when you ask the child the question, they are responsible for the outcome. If you give them the freedom, they're responsible for the outcome. When they're responsible for the outcome, who do you think they blame when it doesn't work out?
Wow. Well, I would imagine that the kids would, say, okay, there's some things that I need to straighten out in how I'm doing it because I've taken ownership of this. So I'm going to make some corrections here and get back on the right path. But now let me ask you this, not only asking the right question, but praising the right actions. How do you feel about that as a parent? I'm not talking about a trophy for everything that they do.
Right.
I'm talking about, and not just getting an A and B on the report card, but
right.
Hey, I see you got an A here, but what went into that A?
Right.
Using your questions, okay? What went into that A? How did you go about getting that B and having them answer the question?
I ask the same questions if it's an A or an F. How hard did you work for that grade? And what would you do differently next time? If it's an A or an F.
I love it. Consistency, mom and dad, consistency. And it's hard to be consistent. We're human. We all have human failings and everything. But here on this, you get more of what you praise than what you criticize. So if we're getting that A and B and you see hard work there, they actually put forth an effort. You definitely want to praise that. Now, if they sort of slid by and just happened into an A, of course, you can speak to that issue too. But you definitely want to praise for the things that they put some hard work into, because I like what you said, when they take ownership of it, they need to take the ownership of the bad and take ownership of the good and note the difference between the two.
I read a book by James Dobson when my kids were super small, and he suggested, and we've done this, to not compare or compliment on brains, athleticism, or looks with siblings. So my husband and I have agreed that in those three categories, we do not compare or compliment necessarily on brains, athleticism, or looks. What we do talk about, to your point, Stan, is effort made in the categories that you are searching and seeking for. So my son is a welder and he plays hockey. And so I will applaud him when he falls. I'll applaud him when he falls because I know he's trying and I know he is making mistakes and he's learning with every mistake. I will applaud him all the time. Like, I saw that awesome effort and you fell 10 times. Like, way to go. I'm so proud of you. I know you've learned every time you got up.
That is so good. And that lets them know that you're right there with them in the mix of things, in the thick of things. I love that. That reminds me, I work in the Royal Ranger Ministry. I have for 30 years, and I had one young man. I've been working with him, and he kind of fall here. But one day he got it right, and he got it right because he put a lot of effort into it. And I looked him in the eye and I said, you know what? I believed in you. And right now, you've gotten to the point to where you're believing in you. And then he turned around, and I want to address this. He turned around and told me, nobody has ever told me in my life that they believed in me. I'm going to tell you, it crushed my heart.
I would have started crying. Yeah.
To hear, oh, hey, I'm a sort of a rough and gruff, honorably retired peace officer, former naval officer, and I was starting to tear up over it because I couldn't believe that this kid had gone all his life and nobody ever said that they believed in him. But I said it because I knew he had the capabilities, and when he put forth the effort to go along with his giftings, that was the time to tell him. And I've continued to get more and more of that type of behavior where he takes ownership of what he does at our local Royal Ranger outpost.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I love that story. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, I brought that up, and that came to mind because of what you're saying. Getting kids to take ownership of what they do. As a parent, that should be one of the primary things that you want to do. So let me segue and ask you about this. I look at parents as the chief role model in the household, the chief teacher, the chief mentor. Uh, how can you help parents in these roles when you come into a household? What do you look for, and how can you help them? Because one of the things I noted about you is leadership. You have a love of leadership. You like to see leadership in the household, and again, that begins with the parents. So how can parents begin that leadership journey with their children, with their teens, as chief role model, chief mentor?
There's a word that comes to mind, Stan, and it's humility. It's humility.
She's about to preach a sermon. Y'all need to listen to her. Go ahead, Gail.
No, I'm not. I'm not going to preach a sermon, but I honestly, it feels like I've apologized more than I've gotten it right. It feels like me being honest and straightforward about my mistakes, and especially with obviously having Jesus at the helm of our life and him being in control. I've not done it 100% all the time. That's why he's there every single day. But for us, and I have not been through this before. I mean, some of the things I've experienced, and I'm like, guys, I've never been through this before. I don't know what I'm doing either. Like, we're in this. It's not like profound. I mean, this isn't a profound word. Honestly, I've said, I'm sorry, and I'm walking through this with you. And I would rather them mess up with me so I can guide them through it, not take them out of it. I will not take you out of prison if you find yourself there. I've said that, they know that, but I will walk with you in it. So I want all the mistakes. Beautiful. I want all the mistakes to happen under my roof so I can walk with them and they can have a sounding board. But I am not anxious to take the pain away because the lessons are in the pain.
Mom and dads, parents and guardians, listen to what she says. There's so many parents who feel that they have to be perfect in everything they do. They can't make mistakes. And what you have here is a mom who's very courageous, who is vulnerable enough to go to her kids and say, you know what, Mama didn't get it right this time. All right. But here's what I learned from that. And here's how I'm going to proceed with it from this point on. You're teaching your children how to handle disappointments and how to overcome their shortcomings, because as Gail, you said, we all have shortcomings. If we didn't have shortcomings, we wouldn't need Jesus Christ as our personal Lord and Savior.
Amen.
But
Amen.
because
Amen.
we have shortcomings, I tell my daughter, I say, it's not a matter of if I'm going to irritate you or upset you. It's just a matter of when.
Right.
Because your daddy is not perfect.
Right.
There's going to be come times when I'm not going to have a clue. And I'll just have to come and tell you, okay, daddy didn't get it. Daddy is learning things as it's coming along. Like when I first got married, one of the things I learned from a mentor is When your wife comes and talks to you, you need to be in one or two modes, okay? You need to find out which mode you need to be in. Problem solving or listening. We men folk, we are serious problem solvers, but that's not always what our wives need. And dads, that's not always what a daughter needs. And sometimes I get into the fix it mode and I get myself in trouble with my daughter who's not looking for me to fix it. And I got to remember, okay, with my wife, I automatically kick into that mode. But sometimes, yeah, I don't kick into that mode with my daughter. And dare I make mistakes in how I communicate with her and how I'm looking at things with her. And I have to come back and go, okay, sweetheart. All right. Daddy goofed up there. I was trying to fix it. I'm in listening mode. And help me help you. Daddy, I need to tell you something. Just go in listening mode.
Right.
Just go in listening mode. Okay.
Right.
And I'll just flip a switch and do that. But all I'm saying is that I'm not perfect.
Right. Right.
Oh, Gail, you don't know how many moms and dads I hear from who just have that problem of perfection. They feel like they got to be like the person next door, but the grass is not always greener in somebody else's yard, is it?
No, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I am. And my kids know it. They call me on it and I get a kick out of it. It's a respectful call out, but it's funny nonetheless. Yeah.
I love it. Respectful call out. Do it with respect. We call out. And mom and dad, you need to give your children that type of freedom.
Yeah. Yes.
To be vulnerable. When you're vulnerable with them, you are giving them freedom to be vulnerable themselves, to admit their mistakes and their shortcomings. And this is going to help your child become self-led. What other problems do you encounter when you talk to your clients about their families?
Motivation. I would say motivation is a big one. And if I'm working with a teenager, I'm not going to take care of 15 years of parenting in 3 months. Like it's a tall order, but motivation happens. I mean, when you're young, obviously you get bright eyed and you get big about, oh my gosh, I want to play with that truck, or I'm going to drive that thing fast, or whatever you're going to do. You get excited. And it is, for me, it was super important to pay attention to what my kids' eyes, what they were big eyes about, like, oh, what they got super excited about when they thought no time was passing. So I brought my son, I felt like I was bankrupt buying Legos. Like I didn't have enough money to buy the Legos that he needed to fuel his brain. I mean, I could have spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars, if not thousands, on Legos. And I brought him into what I called a chop shop. Some Boeing engineering grads built this place where you could tinker with electronics. And I begged the owner, I said, my son is 7. Will you please, please, please help him? Like, can you give him a printer? Give him a printer and he'll take it apart. And so he did. His name was Chris, and he gave Noah a printer. And he gave him a printer, and he took a screwdriver. And this was like 3:30 in the afternoon after school. He took a screwdriver, and it was 6 o'clock. And I said, Noah, how long do you think we've been here? And he said, probably 20 minutes. Is that not a perfect indication of that child in his lane or her lane? So if he's taking apart a computer and no time has passed, he's building PCs today.
Wow.
I mean, that's right. It's a good transition. And he's into cybersecurity and building PCs and software. And so it's not a far reach. And so what I believed and found to be true is when you fuel their motivation when they're young, they will do what they have to do better. When you fuel their love and they know they have something to look forward to after school or on the weekends, they will do what they need to do better. So my other son's a welder. And the same thing goes with him. When he welds or when he plays hockey, he will be a better student, a better son. Like he is in his lane. He's fueling his gifts. And keep your eyes open is the point. Keep the kids' eyes bright. And the motivation will continue with the right questions. But if
you found what the teenager was for.
Right.
What are you for? And that's such an awesome story that what you found out what they were for, you found out the lane that they wanted to be in. That time just, they thought that a few hours was only 20 minutes, but they had found their joy. They had found their why. I try to talk to some of my parents and say, you know what? You need to know your why. And that's one of the things I do with my parents is, hey, you got to create a why statement. Why is your family important to you? Why is your child important to you? But in this instance, you found out that teenager's why. You found out what they were for. And then you were able to, well, at that point, they were self-motivated, were they not?
They were. And it's interesting you bring up the why. I wonder if this is the same thing. So I asked my parents, like, what are your top 3 dreams or visions you have for your kids? And so I have them write down, like ours was respect, integrity, and contributor. So those were our 3 things. So that may be the kind of the same thing as a why. But when you know your 3 overarching things, then you compare it with everything on the ground. And if matching socks don't line up with a contributor or a respectful person, then you don't need to concern yourself with matching socks. If that child is better off carrying a spare umbrella to give to someone in the rain to build character, or focus on getting straight A's, like which one is going to build character? Is that the same as the why for you?
Yes. I mean, they know what their why is. They can put those things up there and say, okay, this is the driving factors of what I do and who I am and where it be family, my child, what they mean to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're viewing things through that filter. And if they don't line up, then you don't waste time in that area. You work in areas, if I understand you correctly, of where things do line up.
Right.
And I love how that beautifully fits in with where you first started today about speaking into your child's life, the things that they need to hear. You have been so consistent throughout this whole interview in hitting those points. And mom and dads, I hope that y'all are hearing this, that when you deal with your child, it's not all about you. It's about that child. And you got to speak to that boy, you got to speak to that girl, you got to speak to that teenager in a way that they're going to understand. You got to do like what Sister Gail here says, you got to find the lane that they need to be in, not that you want to be in. You may want them to be a doctor, but in this instance, hey, this is a person who loved PCs, and then you had another son who got into a lane that loved welding, and both of them love what they do. And as a result of that, they're self-led. One of the points you had here to touch on this, and then we'll try to wrap things up, is family dynamics. Would you allow a child to discover their why? Would you allow them to discover the lane that they want to be in? How does that affect family dynamics?
My kids used to share a room. And of course, I have like a kind of an engineer son and I have a construction son. So one of them would naturally make his bed every morning. And of course, the other one made his bed. It just looked a little different. And the engineer son would often, and I saw this early on, would often vault himself for having the better looking bed and think it was better somehow because it was neater. Being neat and organized doesn't mean you're a better person.
Oh, come on now.
And what I work with is the bones of how you're solving problems. It is not a character issue. Do not turn innate talent into a character flaw. Because my other son doesn't make his bed as neat as my first son, what's the point? The point is they both make their bed. They both make their bed and it looks different. So you can ask both of them if they're motivated to do a thing and they will do it, but the way they get there is different. So the family dynamic needs to be respectful of how other people work and not character assassinate, because not one way is better than another.
I love that. That's great. So now you got your two boys. How far apart in age were they?
2 years.
2 years. Okay. So, and you know, when they're young, they're not quite getting it and they're bumping heads. One of them feels that, hey, he's neat. The other one's not. Why can't he keep his side as neat as I have mine? You know, and it could be the neatness of the bed or picking up stuff, or one likes, you know, the music turned up loud and the other one is a little bit more of a calmer pace. How do you get them to appreciate the differences of their siblings?
I would actually put them in a room and I would like keep them in a room. They would be they'd like lock in a room, and until they used I statements, like they had to work it out kind of. They had to work it out. I mean, I had coached them and it was hard. And sometimes it was through gritted teeth because they didn't want to do it, but they needed to work it out. And it's so important as a parent for me that they see and know value in each other. So if they were bickering about something that didn't amount to anything, I would say, isn't it fabulous, Noah, that you needed this prototype for a software system and your brother came up with it out of thin air and you can develop it? Like, isn't it amazing? And so now they go to each other's stand with what they need of each other's gifts because they know what they're good at and they will use each other for that. So for example, the engineer isn't much of a cook. The construction person is. So what they've arranged is the construction kid cooks and the engineer cleans up. And they did that themselves. So that's what's happened over time. But you're right. Of course, when they're young, it was hard to do that.
And it's even difficult when they're in teenage years also, as they're kind of going in different ways and everything. Well, Gail, you brought a lot to the table today. I know you have a website and your parenting services. How can parents find you out there? And I'm going to put your links to your website and your services in the podcast description for all the different episodes. But go ahead and tell them now how they can get hold of you.
Gail at planstoprospercoaching.com. And that plans to prosper is straight out of Jeremiah 29:11.
Oh, now she's not just saying that she's a Christian or a Christian parenting coach, but you know, she's put up there what she's for. She's for having plans for your child to prosper, having plans for your family to prosper. And I encourage you, moms and dads, you know, go to her website, look at what she has to offer. And if any of those services are something that the Lord's calling upon your heart to do, then hear the Lord out and act on it and give Gail Swift a call. Gail, you have been a wonderful, wonderful guest. Thank you for being on my podcast.
Thank you for having me, Stan. It's been so nice, and you make me feel so comfortable. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm just trying to do my best for what I have.
Mhm. Me too.
My
Me
wife,
too.
my wife of 26 years will tell you that I have my rough sides and things I still need to work on. But hey, I appreciate that encouraging word for you. Well, parents, this is the end of this episode, and I want to encourage you, as I always do, to go forth and fearlessly parent. God bless. All right.